Young black man helps racist elder on the road with his broken car, but an unexpected revelation the next day completely transforms his life. In a small town in the rural United States, marked by deep racial tensions, an altruistic gesture can change everything. Marcus, an 18-year-old black teenager, always believed that doing the right thing was more important than being recognized for it. When he helped an elderly man known for his racist and hostile opinions, he couldn't imagine that this simple encounter would lead him to discover hidden truths about his past and his identity. Marcus Carter was a young man with a dream. He worked part-time at a garage while dreaming of becoming an automotive engineer. He was cherished by his mother, Angela, a strong nurse who raised him alone and had the respect of many in the community, even while facing the harshness of prejudice in his town. The absence of the father he never knew always weighed on his life, but his motto, "Do what is right, even when no one is watching," guided his actions. The town, with its rural roads and simple houses, carried a past of racial divisions that seemed impossible to overcome. One afternoon, while returning from work, Marcus spotted Earl Harrison, a reclusive white man and former landowner, with a broken car by the side of the road. Despite Earl's initial hostility, who was suspicious of the help from a young black man, Marcus insisted and fixed the vehicle, leaving without expecting anything in return. The sunset reflected both Earl's isolation and Marcus's hope. The next day, while chatting with his colleagues at the garage, Marcus was shocked to hear comments about Earl. He discovered that the elderly man had a history of insulting black residents and that his racist opinions were well known. This left him conflicted, but still, Marcus felt he had done the right thing by helping. The situation took an unexpected turn when Earl showed up at Marcus's house, handing him an envelope and thanking him for his help. The tension between Earl and Angela, who was paralyzed upon seeing the man she had only known until then as a grumpy old man, was palpable. Earl left, but left questions in the air that could not be ignored. That night, Angela revealed to Marcus a secret she had hidden for years. Earl was his biological father. The relationship between the two had been broken by Earl's prejudice, who never accepted the idea of having a black son. This revelation shook Marcus, who found himself in the midst of a whirlwind of emotions. Confused and furious, Marcus confronted Earl at his home, demanding explanations. During the heated discussion, Earl found himself forced to confront the loneliness and guilt he had carried for years. The old man, trapped in a past of resentments, found in Marcus the opportunity to confront his choices. The next dawn, Marcus reflected on forgiveness. He realized that, to move forward, he needed to find peace within himself. The new day at the garage, with the sun rising among the tools, symbolized a fresh start, not just for him, but also for the complex relationship forming between father and son. The story of Marcus and Earl is not just about prejudice and redemption, but about the search for identity and connection in a world that often seems divided. As their lives intertwine, they will discover that the path to forgiveness and understanding can be difficult, but it is also profoundly transformative. Marcus was sitting in his room, the walls decorated with car posters and engineering charts, but his mind was far from plans for the future. He felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. The revelation that Earl was his biological father left him confused and full of questions. How could a man who had expressed so much hatred toward people of his color be part of his life? What did this mean for his identity? That morning, Marcus decided he needed to find answers. He quickly dressed and left home, determined to confront Earl again. However, upon arriving at the old man's house, he found the door closed and no response. Frustration grew within him. Why had Earl withdrawn after the confession? What else was he hiding? Marcus sat on the porch step, feeling as if he were in an emotional limbo. While he waited, his friends, Jamal and Lisa, showed up. They were a crucial part of his life, always ready to support him, but today they noticed something was wrong. Jamal, a tall and outgoing young man, was the first to ask, "Hey man, what's up? You look like a zombie." Marcus hesitated but decided to open up. He told Jamal and Lisa about Earl, about what he had discovered and how he felt. Jamal remained silent while Lisa, with her concerned eyes, spoke. That's a lot to process. And Earl, he's always been so hostile. Are you sure you want to get involved with him? Lisa's words echoed in Marcus's mind. He knew that many in the town had formed opinions about Earl, but he had never seen the man as a father. The idea of seeking a relationship with someone who had not only abandoned him, but also represented so much of the prejudice Marcus faced, seemed unbearable. At the garage, the day dragged on. Marcus was present physically, but his mind was elsewhere. He remembered when he was a child, dreaming of being an engineer. He wanted to create, fix, and change things. But now, he felt trapped in a cycle of pain and confusion. As his colleagues talked about cars and engines, he could barely concentrate. Earl's voice and his mother's words echoed in his mind, creating an emotional storm. By the end of the day, Marcus decided he needed to confront Earl again, not only for the need for answers, but for the need to understand who he was. The relationship he had always wanted, with a father who accepted him, was now at stake. He needed to know if Earl was willing to change, to redeem himself. When he arrived at Earl's house, he knocked on the door, his hand trembling with nerves. When Earl finally opened it, the look on the old man's face was one of surprise and fear. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I need to understand. You are my father, and I can't just ignore that. Why did you stay away? Why didn't you want to know me?" Anger and pain mixed in Marcus's voice. Earl hesitated, his gaze shifting. I didn't know how to deal with it. Society is harsh, and I didn't want to hurt you." Earl's words were like a knife to a heart already wounded. "Hurt? You hurt me by ignoring me my whole life. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough. How can you say you didn't want to hurt me?" The tension in the air was palpable. Earl, who had always seemed so strong and unshakable, now appeared a broken man. Marcus realized that behind all the hostility was a man who was also struggling with his own insecurities and regrets. "I don't expect you to forgive me now, but I want to try to understand you. I don't want this to come between us. Can we try to build something, even if it's hard?" Marcus asked, his voice calmer but still full of pain. Earl looked at him, and for a moment they were just two men trying to find their place in the world. Marcus's internal struggle between the desire to walk away and the hope to connect grew more intense. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. Every step toward Earl would challenge his inner strength, bringing forth his insecurities and fears. But at the same time, he felt he needed to do this for himself, for his identity, and for the future he had dreamed of. As the two men faced each other, a new narrative began to unfold, one that promised to test not only Marcus's strength, but also Earl's ability to confront his demons. And deep down, they both knew that the search for connection could be the first step toward true redemption. Marcus felt his heart race as he faced Earl, the mix of anger and hope bringing him to the brink of an emotional collapse. The tension between them was palpable, as if the air were charged with all the unspoken words. Earl looked older than ever, the years of bitterness and regret etched on his face. For Marcus, the image of the man he had always feared and despised was now transforming into something more human, but that did not make the pain any less intense. "I don't know if I can do this," Earl finally whispered, his gaze drifting to the floor. "Society is not kind to people like me. I didn't want you to carry that burden." "I already carry a burden," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "Because of you, I grew up without a father, and now, finding out that you are my father, I feel even more lost." He felt the anger turning into sadness, an overwhelming weight threatening to consume his determination. Earl took a deep breath, trying to muster courage. "I am not the person you think I am, Marcus. I made mistakes, many of them, but I don't want you to follow the same path. I don't want you to become like me." Marcus felt a chill in his stomach. Earl's words, though filled with pain, were also a warning. He realized that even if he wanted to understand Earl, he could not ignore the past. There was a thin line between accepting the man and condemning him. "I don't want to be like you, but I want to understand why you became this way." At that moment, the conversation turned into an emotional battleground. Earl hesitated, as if struggling against his own memories. "You don't know what it's like to live with hatred inside you, what it's like to be rejected, to be seen as a monster. I let it consume me, and I don't want you to go through that." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Then let's help each other. I'm not here to judge you, but to understand." "What can I learn from you, Earl?" The question hung in the air, and Earl seemed lost in thought. Marcus's vulnerability touched him in a way he didn't expect. I don't know if I have anything to teach. I just know that life is full of bad and good choices. I made many bad ones." When Marcus turned to leave, a feeling of helplessness washed over him. He wanted to connect, but Earl seemed to refuse to accept that possibility. He felt like he was at a dead end, caught between the desire to understand and the reality of a father who didn't know how to redeem himself. Before we continue with this emotional story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know which city you are watching this video from in the comments. In the days that followed, Marcus's internal struggle intensified. He couldn't stop thinking about Earl and everything he had learned. The pressure to find his place in life became increasingly oppressive. Work at the shop turned into a temporary refuge, but even there, the weight of uncertainty followed him. His colleagues noticed his distraction and how he was shutting himself off. Jamal and Lisa tried to reach out, but Marcus felt unable to share everything that was tormenting him. "You need to talk to him again," Jamal insisted one day while they were at the shop. "Don't let this opportunity pass. You'll never know if you don't try." "What if it just makes things worse?" Marcus retorted, frustration showing in his voice. "What if Earl isn't ready to change? What if I end up getting hurt even more?" Lisa, overhearing the conversation, intervened. "You need to take the risk, Marcus. Sometimes growth comes from the most painful situations. If you don't try, you'll never know what could have been." The words of his friends made him reflect. Marcus realized he was hiding behind fear and pain. If he continued to avoid Earl, he would be depriving himself of a chance to truly understand his own identity. He remembered his dreams of being an engineer, of creating and fixing, and realized it was time to apply that same mindset to his personal life. After days of anguish, he decided to give Earl another chance. He needed to face his demons, not only to understand his father, but to understand himself. He knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but now he felt he had support. Jamal and Lisa would be by his side, no matter what happened. With his heart racing and his mind full of doubts, Marcus made his way to Earl's house once more. He didn't know what to expect, but he was determined not to let fear take over. It was time to confront the truth, no matter how painful it was, and find out if the connection he so desired could really become a reality. Marcus climbed the stairs leading to Earl's house, his heart pounding in his chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, as anxiety took hold of him. He could have given up, but the thought of distancing himself from Earl left him even more distressed. He needed to understand the man in front of him, and more importantly, he needed to understand himself. When he reached the door, Marcus hesitated. He wanted to be strong, but uncertainty filled him with doubt. With a deep breath, he knocked. The sound echoed, and the wait stretched into a few moments that felt eternal. Finally, the door opened, and Earl appeared. His face looked tired and marked by worry, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "You came back," Earl said, his voice low as if he himself was surprised by it. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice more confident than he felt. "We need to talk." Before Earl could respond, Marcus stepped inside, and the heavy atmosphere of the house enveloped them. The smell of cigarettes and the clutter made the environment suffocating. Earl closed the door and turned around, looking more vulnerable than the last time. They sat in the small living room, and an uncomfortable silence settled between them. I don't know where to start," Earl said, breaking the heavy silence. I guess there's not much I can say that will fix what I did. Maybe you can start with the truth, Marcus replied, frustration mingling with his determination. Tell me why you distanced yourself. What happened for you to become who you are today? Earl looked at the floor as if the answers were buried under the weight of his past decisions. I'm not a good man, Marcus. I've made bad choices. I was an absent father and a failed husband, and all of that led me to a place of loneliness and despair. But why didn't you try to change? Marcus questioned, anger boiling inside him. You surrendered to hate and pain. Was there no other option for you? In that moment, it felt like there wasn't, Earl admitted, his voice trembling. But the truth is, I was afraid to open up, to be vulnerable. And when you close yourself off from love, you end up closing yourself off from life. Earl's words resonated with Marcus, who felt a wave of understanding. It was a simple yet powerful revelation. He realized that Earl's life was a reflection of his own insecurities and fears. And what if you had tried? He asked, his voice softer now. What if you had sought help? Earl raised his eyes, and Marcus saw the pain in them. Because I didn't think I deserved it. I let the past define me. And now I feel like there's no turning back. Earl's vulnerability touched Marcus's heart, and for a moment he saw himself in a mirror. His father's life was a warning about what he could become if he didn't face his own demons. He had spent so much time hiding from the pain, avoiding confronting his own flaws, that now he felt the weight of it all. You can change, Earl. It's not too late to try, Marcus said, determination growing in his voice. If you allow yourself to be vulnerable, maybe you can find a different path. And I want to do that too. I want to understand who I am, not just as your son, but as a man. Earl looked surprised by his son's response. For him, the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. Marcus was willing to forgive, to accept Earl's flaws as part of his own journey. It was a step he might never have considered. I don't know if I deserve this, Earl replied, his voice choked. But if you're willing to try, maybe I should too. I can't promise it will be easy, but I'm willing to try. At that moment, something changed. The connection Marcus had longed for began to form between them. It was as if, for the first time, they both recognized each other's pain, and at the same time, the hope that could arise from that understanding. As they talked, Marcus felt the tension dissipate. He realized he wasn't just trying to understand Earl, but also himself. It was a journey of rebirth, an opportunity to overcome the past and shape a different future. In a moment of shared vulnerability, father and son began to rebuild themselves. Marcus smiled, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. Let's try together, he said, and the words came out as a commitment. A promise that, despite the difficulties, they would not face the path alone. It was time to confront fears and challenge flaws, transforming pain into strength. Earl nodded, a glimmer of hope beginning to shine in his eyes. The journey would not be easy, but with both of them willing to open up and support each other, there was a new chance for redemption. And so, a new chapter began for them, filled with challenges, but also with possibilities. The conversation between Marcus and Earl was a turning point. As soon as the words of hope were exchanged, a new weight settled on Marcus's shoulders. It was a weight of responsibility, but also of freedom. He felt that he had taken the first step toward a truth that had always been present, but that he had avoided. In the following weeks, Marcus dedicated himself to this new journey of self-discovery. He began attending therapy sessions, something he had never considered before. In the room, he talked about his insecurities, his expectations, and especially about the complicated relationship he had with Earl. Each session was a challenge, but also a form of liberation. He felt vulnerable, but for the first time, he felt he was facing the pain that had accompanied him for so long. Meanwhile, Earl tried to adapt to this new dynamic. He started attending a support group where he shared his experiences and listened to the stories of other men who were also struggling with their demons. Although the change was difficult, he realized that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather of courage. With each meeting, Earl felt as though he was shedding some layers of pain that had accumulated over the years. The relationship between father and son began to transform. On the days they met, there was a new kind of conversation. They talked about their fears, their hopes, and the small victories they were achieving. But despite the progress, the difficulties were also palpable. Marcus began to feel the pressure of the past. Sometimes he found himself thinking about how much easier it was to ignore his feelings than to deal with them. He felt that at any moment he could crumble under the weight of the expectations he had created for himself. On one of those difficult nights, he decided to go out for a walk and breathe some fresh air. As he walked through the quiet streets, he reflected on the challenges that still needed to be overcome. It was at that moment that he encountered Sophia, a school friend who greeted him with a warm smile. They began to talk, and for a brief moment Marcus felt relieved. Sophia always had a way of bringing a smile to his face, even on the darkest days. She noticed that something was different about him and asked what was going on. Marcus hesitated, but decided to open his heart. He talked about the journey he was facing with Earl and how it was changing his perspective on life. Sophia listened attentively, and her words of encouragement helped him realize that he was not alone. She shared her own struggles and how she had found strength in moments of vulnerability. That conversation ignited a new flame of hope in Marcus. He realized that although there were obstacles, there was also support and love around him. Meanwhile, Earl faced his own challenges. He struggled against the urge to fall back into old patterns of behavior. On difficult days, the temptation to shut down again was strong. He felt the pressure of the past and the guilt of having failed as a father. But when he looked at Marcus, he remembered the promise they made to each other. The idea of going back was not an option. Earl began writing in a journal, putting his thoughts and feelings on paper. It was a way to free himself from the pain and at the same time a step toward healing. The impact of the turning point in both their lives was evident. They were striving to change, but the shadows of the past still haunted them. One night, while watching a movie together, Marcus noticed that Earl seemed more distant. He decided to address the issue, asking if his father was feeling okay. Earl hesitated, but the vulnerability they had cultivated encouraged him to open up. "Some days are harder than others," Earl said, his voice trembling. "I feel like I'm fighting against a sea of doubts." Marcus moved closer, placing his hand on his father's shoulder. "We're in this together, remember that. We don't have to face everything alone. If you feel lost, just let me know." The conversation turned into a moment of deep connection. They both began to understand that the journey toward change was not linear. There would be ups and downs, but the important thing was that they were willing to face it all together. Over time, Marcus and Earl discovered that vulnerability was, in fact, a strength. It was a space where they could support each other and find the courage to continue. Although the challenges were still present, their determination to change and reconnect united them in ways they had never imagined. The journey was just beginning, but now there was hope and love where there had once been only pain and loneliness. Marcus had entered a new phase of his life, marked by internal challenges and a deep desire for change. The conversation with Earl had been a catalyst, something that awakened in him a strength he didn't know existed. In the days that followed, he found himself battling his insecurities and fears, but also embracing the opportunity to get to know himself better. The first challenge Marcus faced was self-acceptance. He had always compared himself to others. He felt he was never good enough, that his choices were wrong. But as he opened up in therapy, he began to realize that those critical voices were just echoes of a past he was ready to leave behind. He learned to look at himself with more compassion, to recognize his flaws as part of his journey and not as permanent definitions of who he was. Meanwhile, his relationship with Earl was also evolving. Marcus remembered moments when his father seemed distant, but now, instead of feeling frustrated, he tried to understand. He began to realize that Earl was also on a path of transformation. When his father opened up about his struggles, Marcus felt it was a sign of trust. This created a safe space for both of them to share their fears and hopes. There was a day when Marcus decided to take Earl to a park. He wanted to create a light moment, away from the heavy conversations that often surrounded them. As they walked, Marcus remembered a time when they used to play there, before the problems became so big. This brought a smile to Earl's face, and they both laughed as they reminisced about childhood mischief. It was a small step, but for Marcus it represented a significant breakthrough. He was doing something that allowed them to reconnect even amidst challenges. However, the shadows of the past did not disappear easily. On one of the hardest days, Marcus found himself surrounded by a wave of doubts. He began to question whether he was truly making progress. The internal pressure mounted, and in a moment of impulse, he decided to go for a walk alone. The solitude of the night enveloped him, and he sat on a bench reflecting on everything he had learned. It was there that he remembered Sophia's words, who always encouraged him to look for the small victories. He realized that even in the dark nights, there were small points of light guiding him. When he returned home, he found Earl sitting at the table with an open journal. His father invited him to join him, and together they began discussing the pages filled with thoughts and feelings. Marcus realized that although Earl's words were heavy, each one was part of the healing process. He understood that his father was trying just as he was. It was a moment of deep empathy, where both recognized the difficulties they faced, but also the strength they were cultivating. His friendship with Sophia also played a crucial role in Marcus's journey. She supported him not just as a friend, but as a partner in his growth. Through heartfelt conversations and moments of relaxation, she helped him see that life was not just about overcoming challenges, but also about celebrating small achievements. He learned to value each step, each new perspective that arose. The success he once associated only with material accomplishments was now seen as personal and emotional growth. Over time, Marcus began to apply the lessons he learned in his daily life. He allowed himself to feel, to open up to new experiences, and to trust himself. He realized that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather a courage that made him stronger. With each step forward, he became more aware of his emotions and more willing to seek support when needed. The challenges did not completely disappear, but now Marcus had tools and a support network. He knew that the journey of overcoming was ongoing, but the transformation he was experiencing filled him with hope. The connection with Earl grew stronger, and together they were creating a new legacy, one of love, support, and understanding. Marcus learned that even in adversity, there was always a way forward, and that true wealth lay in the relationships he cultivated and the courage to be who he truly was. On that rainy morning, Marcus felt a storm of emotions within him. It was the day of the presentation he feared so much. He had been preparing for months for this moment, where he would have to present an important project at work, something that could propel his career. But instead of feeling prepared, he was overwhelmed by a sense of inadequacy, as if he were about to fail. The critical voices he had fought so hard to silence echoed back in his mind, challenging his newfound confidence. He remembered the conversation he had with Earl about the fear of failure. His father had told him that everyone faced doubts, but it was the courage to get up and try that truly mattered. Now, Marcus felt as if he were on the edge of an abyss, ready to take a step, but paralyzed by uncertainty. He took a deep breath, trying to find calm amid the turmoil. As he got ready, a message from Sophia appeared on his phone. "I'm rooting for you. Remember that you are stronger than you think." Her words were like a balm, bringing a little light to his anguish. He replied with a simple thank you, but it gave him a boost. He decided he wouldn't let fear win. There was a greater purpose in his effort. It wasn't just about material success, but about proving to himself that he was capable. When he arrived at the office, the atmosphere was tense and electric. Colleagues moved quickly, all anxious about the upcoming presentations. Marcus felt his heart race. He remembered the small victories he had achieved in the past few months, the open dialogue with Earl, the deep conversations with Sophia, the self-awareness he was cultivating. Those moments were like bricks that built his confidence. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the stage. His colleagues' gazes were fixed on him, and the pressure felt heavy. The bright lights temporarily blinded him, and his mind began to spin. But instead of succumbing to panic, he closed his eyes for a moment and remembered everything he had learned. He was not alone. He had support. He had a story to tell. With a slightly trembling voice, he began to present his project. At first, the words came out hesitantly, but as he spoke, something inside him began to transform. He started to share not only the data and statistics, but also his passion for what he did, the importance of that project for the team, and how he believed it could help everyone grow together. He remembered the conversations with Earl, the laughter in the park, Sophia's unconditional friendship, and with each word he felt his fear dissipate. The audience was attentive, and he could see faces encouraging him, some people even nodding in approval. That gave him strength. Marcus allowed himself to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability transformed into a powerful bond of connection with his peers. He talked about his struggles, about how failures were part of the path to success. And in doing so, he not only presented a project, but also shared a piece of his personal journey. When he finished, a reverent silence filled the room. Then, applause and praise began to echo, and he felt a huge weight dissipate. He had done it. Not only had he fulfilled his task, but he had also emotionally stripped himself bare, creating a space where others could also feel safe to share their own struggles. After the presentation, Earl was waiting for him. The father looked at him with pride in his eyes and a smile that lit up his face. "You were amazing, my son. I knew you had it in you." Marcus felt the warmth of the words and the connection strengthening between them. Instead of just a father and son, they were becoming friends, accomplices in the battles of life. In that moment, Marcus realized that his biggest challenge wasn't the presentation itself, but the internal battle against his insecurities. He had found his inner strength, and in doing so, not only overcame an obstacle, but also reconnected with those he loved. He knew that challenges would still come, but now he was prepared to face them, with courage and with those who supported him by his side. The journey of overcoming continued, but now with a new understanding. The true wealth lay in the relationships he cultivated and in the courage to be who he truly was. After the presentation, Marcus felt as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The adrenaline was still pulsing in his body, but now it was accompanied by a wave of relief and happiness. His heart was still racing, but no longer from anxiety. It was a beat of enthusiasm. He stepped away from the stage, still surrounded by the applause and admiring looks of his peers. That feeling of validation was new, and he absorbed it with gratitude. The room slowly emptied, and lively conversation began to flow among colleagues. Marcus saw Sophia approaching, her radiant smile conveying all the support he needed. "You were amazing. I knew you could do it. Your passion really shone through," she said, her eyes sparkling. Her words warmed his heart, and for a moment he felt invincible. "Thank you, Sophia. I don't know what I would have done without you and Earl by my side. It wasn't just about the project. It was about allowing myself to be me," Marcus replied, feeling the sincerity in every word. He realized that true victory wasn't just in presenting his project, but in opening up and allowing others to see his true self. As they talked, Earl joined them. The father smiled, with a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You really touched everyone, Marcus. I'm so proud of you. It wasn't just a presentation, it was a life lesson." Earl's words resonated deeply within him. He had overcome not only his fears, but he had also inspired others to embrace their vulnerabilities. In the days that followed, the repercussions of Presentation Day began to manifest. Marcus's project was enthusiastically approved and began to be implemented immediately. He received praise not only for the quality of his work, but also for the way he connected with the team. Colleagues began to open up more to each other, sharing experiences and personal challenges. The atmosphere in the office changed, and a sense of camaraderie began to blossom. In a team meeting, a colleague raised his hand and said, "I would like to share something." Marcus's presentation made me realize that we often feel insecure, but it's important to talk about it. If Marcus can open up, maybe I can too. The group fell silent, but soon began sharing their own stories. That exchange of experiences brought a new dimension to professional relationships, and Marcus realized that his act of courage had triggered a domino effect of empathy and solidarity. That night, sitting at the table with Earl and Sophia, Marcus reflected on everything that had happened. The dinner was filled with laughter and lively conversations, and he felt grateful to have such special people in his life. "You know," he began, "I never thought a presentation could change so much. I think I learned that it's not just about being successful, but about being true. When we are honest about our insecurities, we can touch others in ways we never imagined." Sophia looked at him with a smile. "That's true, and you did it in such a beautiful way. You allowed yourself to be vulnerable, and that made all the difference. People connect with authenticity." Earl agreed, adding, "The courage to expose yourself isn't easy, but you proved it's worth it. Now, you're an example for all of us." Marcus felt emotional with their words. He realized that the road ahead still had challenges, but now he would face them with more confidence. He had learned that by opening his heart, he could not only overcome his own fears, but also create a safe space for others. Life was a journey full of ups and downs, but now he had a solid support network formed by deeper bonds than he had ever imagined. That night, as he prepared for bed, Marcus smiled at the thought of the future. He knew that challenges would still come, but now he was ready to face them, knowing he was not alone. True strength lay in being authentic and cultivating genuine relationships. And so, he fell asleep with a renewed sense of hope and determination, ready for whatever would come next. In the days that followed the presentation, Marcus began to realize that his life had changed significantly. He not only gained approval for his project, but also sparked something greater within his work environment. His colleagues, once so focused on their own goals and insecurities, now felt more at ease sharing their vulnerabilities. The connection Marcus had created from his own courage spread like wildfire, transforming the dynamics of the office. The atmosphere of camaraderie that emerged made everyone feel more comfortable expressing their thoughts and feelings. A meeting that had previously been just a formality turned into a moment of genuine exchange and mutual support. Marcus realized that by opening up, he had encouraged others to do the same. This was not just about work, it was about building a safe space where everyone could be authentic. Looking back, Marcus reflected on his journey. He remembered the anxiety he felt before the presentation, the fear of failure, and how, instead of hiding, he chose to confront those emotions. He understood that true success was not only about being recognized for his work, but having the courage to be who he really was. This transformation not only affected him personally, but also changed the lives of his colleagues, allowing them to seek authenticity and connection in their own lives. In a more intimate conversation with Earl and Sophia, Marcus expressed his gratitude. He never thought a moment could have such a profound impact. Looking at all of this, he realized that life is about the connections we make. This experience taught him that being true and vulnerable is the way to growth. Sophia smiled, touched by his words, and Earl nodded, proud of his son. However, not everyone was happy with the new atmosphere of openness and solidarity that was forming. A colleague, who had always been competitive and focused only on his own ascent, began to feel threatened by the changes. He could not stand seeing others coming together and supporting one another, and he decided he needed to act. In a moment of desperation, he devised a plan to discredit Marcus, spreading malicious rumors about his character and work. However, the reaction was different from what he expected. The colleagues, who had previously been indifferent to his actions, now united in defense of Marcus. They recognized the authenticity and courage he had shown and were not willing to let anyone try to bring him down. The support Marcus had cultivated turned into a shield against negativity. The true strength he had created not only protected him, but also became a source of inspiration for others. By the end of that week, when the ill-intentioned colleague was confronted with his own mistakes, it was Marcus who had the chance to take a stand. With his newfound wisdom and compassion, he chose not to seek revenge. Instead, he offered an opportunity for dialogue and reconciliation. He calmly said that he understood the colleague might have felt threatened. But true strength lies in supporting one another, not in trying to tear each other down. Let's talk and see how we can work together. This approach not only disarmed the situation but also transformed the rival into an ally. Marcus realized that true victory lay in being able to turn negativity into understanding and friendship. He not only overcame his fears, but also became an example of how empathy and authenticity can transform even the most difficult situations. In the end, Marcus understood that his journey was not just about achieving success, but about creating a legacy of unity and solidarity. He had learned that the power of being true can not only change his own life, but also profoundly impact those around him. At the moment he lay down to sleep, a smile formed on his face. He knew he was ready for any challenge that came his way, not because he was strong, but because he had learned to be true and to value the connections he had created. And now he invited everyone to reflect on their own journeys. What lessons have you learned about authenticity and connection with others? Share your experiences in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Every interaction helps spread messages of hope and unity, and together we can create a space where everyone feels truly seen and heard. Let's do this now.